Our first time storyteller. Give it up for Dylan.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hello, English speakers of Santiago. Forgive me, I wasn't originally going to tell a story tonight, but I was inspired by all the stories tonight that I figured I'd come up and share. So, I want to tell you about getting over a girl that I loved. This girl was about a foot tall, covered in black fur. She had a really scruffy beard and about 8 nipples. Her name was Bailey, and she was my first dog. Bailey was one of those rescue dogs that never trusted anybody. Even deep into our long relationship, she never really trusted anybody. But we slowly chipped away at it. It was one of those things where when we first got her, we thought we were getting close, and we would start petting her, and then all of a sudden we just hear and we realized we weren't there yet. But slowly but surely, after years and years and years, Bailey started to love us and appreciate us. And slowly but surely, Bailey also got old. And that black fur turned to gray fur, and then white fur. And she had one of those really lovely salt and pepper beards, which was kind of cool because my dad also has the same exact sort of hair color. You know, the whole like owners look like their dogs thing. Oh my God, it's if you put it on the internet, it would explode. So, what was interesting about Bailey was watching the transformation of her energy over time. So, we were all very busy people. Both my mother and father worked. My brother and I were at school, and so what we had to do with Bailey was we would quarantine her to our basement. It's a very lovely basement. It's perfectly fine, don't worry, it's not animal abuse. But that's where she would go when we'd be out for the day. And I would be the first one home, so she loved me. I would get to be the one who gets to release the Kraken. And I remember every day when I would let her out of the basement because the back door looks directly at the basement door. And so I'd walk in the back door, turn the key, and I would hear this intense and it was Bailey scratching at the door. And eventually I would open and she'd burst out and go running and then get that sort of dog lostness of like, well, I was excited, but now I don't know where to go. And then I would let her outside and she'd run around in the yard. And over time, that turned into a lighter scratch. I would walk in the door and I would just hear. And then she became older and got more tired. And I didn't mention this before, but that basement door is at the top of the stairs. So when you open the basement door, there's a little platform where she would stand and she would scratch. But when she'd be in the basement for hours, it would take that dog hearing to really hear people coming in the house. And then she got older and lost her hearing a little bit, and I wouldn't hear the scratching anymore. And I would come in the house and not hear scratching, and then open the door, and on the platform, no dog. And then I would go down the stairs, and the dog would be there, and she'd just be very confused, and oh, you're here now. She was also getting a little blind too, so she didn't always know who was approaching her. And so blindness, hearing went, she started getting little bumps on her, and this was all when I was in high school. So then I went off to college. She's still living, but getting older. And I got the call from my mom one day. He said, first of all, has anyone ever gotten this call? The, hey, it's time, we're gonna let the dog go call? Anybody?
It's the worst.
Thank you. So I got the call and said, we're gonna put the dog down. I'd never been through this experience before, so I didn't know what to expect, but I went to college a couple hours from where I grew up, and so I took a bus back home, a couple hours. Spent the last day that my dog was going to be around with her in the house, just staring at her longingly, and she was probably very confused, but also not really knowing what was going on. And I was told when my parents got home from work that day that off she went. We would take her to the vet, and that would be that. So sure enough, my parents got home. We all got into the car. My dad sat in the front seat, and my mom and I sat in the back seat with Bailey, our dog. And my mom and I were just looking at her and petting her. And interestingly enough, my dad was just in the front seat rationalizing it all. My dad is a very, I don't know if this is a male trait or just a my dad trait, but he likes to just kind of speak very matter-of-factly and rationalize things, and just even emotional things, it just has to be rational. Like for instance, I remember we were at Thanksgiving one time and we're all getting together and starting to sit down and eat, and my dad just goes, "We're all here, this is nice, we have food, this is lovely." So he was doing the same thing with our dog and just saying, "I think she knows what's happening. She knows. It's time she knows." And so we get to the vet, and of course, by the way, my mom and I are just in the back seat like, "Shh, stop it." And we get to the vet, and we walk the dog in. For some reason, we still have her on a leash. We walk the dog in, and they take her into this room, and the three of us go with the doctor, and then she explains how this works, which is they shave off a little piece of her paw, and then they put a needle in her to put her to sleep, and then they put another one in her to put her to sleep for good. So then the doctor left the room and said, "You can have a moment to say goodbye." And so my mom was the first on the waterworks train. She just was already just overflowing with tears. And so it was a matter of who was going to crack next, me or my dad. And I told you who my dad is. So if you're a betting person, it's going to be me. Doctor comes in, as she said, shaves off a piece of her paw, puts the first needle in, and my dad is watching my dog, Bailey, and I could just feel all of the memories just washing over my dad in that moment. My dad was the one who woke up early and stepped in her pee every morning. My dad was the one who then cleaned it up and then said, "Hey, let's go for a walk every morning." My dad was the one who, by the way, like, super romantic guy, still meets my mom at the train every night, even though it's a 2-minute walk from her house. No matter what time, he's got to do it. And he would bring the dog with him every time. And it got to a point where the dog knew what was happening. Bailey knew what was happening when my dad would say, "We're gonna go see Mommy." She would just be wandering around the house and then, oh, where are we going? Oh my God. My dad was the one who took her all of those places. And so as my dog is sitting there on the little doggy operating table, slowly, for the last time, closing her eyes, my dad just takes his glasses off, and it's the first time I ever saw my dad cry. I just saw him hit it. I saw it hit him like a freight train. And so then there's me. And that's how we get to our theme of the night of letting go. Because I remember thinking about what typical grief is like and how you're supposed to grieve. It's like, hey, I'm losing someone that I love. I'm supposed to cry, right? Come on, I'm supposed to cry. And I got to the point where I was looking at my dog, literally just blinking, trying to blink out tears. And it wasn't happening. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just the sort of phase that you go through in college where you're just kind of like, I don't care about anything, man. Or whether it just was how I generally express myself. But ultimately, both my parents left the room, and I was alone in the room with Bailey, my first dog, who is now no longer carrying a beating heart, and I couldn't cry. I stood there, put my hand on her paw, and I couldn't cry. And I left the room, not having shed a tear. But my mom and my dad had said, hey, we're going to go out for dinner. We're going to celebrate our dog's life. So we went to a sushi restaurant. And as we're sitting in the waiting room, they were playing some very traditional Japanese music. So all of a sudden it gets really quiet. There was a chatter in the restaurant, but it gets so quiet where you can suddenly hear the music playing. And I just hear, I've heard that you've settled down, that you've found a girl and you're married now. You guys know that song? That's Adele's Someone Like You. And it was probably a month after there was a Saturday Night Live sketch with Emma Stone about how people put that song on to cry. And so I start laughing a little bit because I know what I had just gone through of trying to force myself to cry. And I just started laughing and describing to my mom like, oh, this is funny because I was trying to cry and this is the song. And so I'm laughing, and then the song fades out. It's quiet. And then another song comes on. It's a little bit funny, this feeling inside is not one of those you can easily hide. Oh. You guys know that one too? So it took until the line later in the song where Elton John goes, I hope you don't mind that I put down in words how wonderful life is when you're in the world. For me to take tears of laughter into real, genuine, sobbing, I miss my dog tears. And so I shared with my mom all of the irony of the soundtrack that was playing. And we laughed and we thought about what other songs might play next. Maybe that song that plays on American Idol when they vote people off. You had a bad day, take it one day. And then we finished our dinner and we went home. And we arrived home and there's no scratching, no door to open. And she was gone. Thank you.
That is the worst phone call to get. I think when I lived in Ecuador, my parents and my dog lived on the other side of the world, actually in Oman, so I couldn't get home. I think I'm the first person in the company ever decided to give dog bereavement day to. I was just like, I can't be here. And I got 2 days off work because I was so upset. So try that one. Good, it works. Right, so now for our last storyteller of the evening, let's give it up for our Rickus.